The message, mistake. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Life-Changing True Stories today. I bring you a powerful and heartfelt story about how one small mistake can lead to the most unexpected connections. Sometimes destiny hides behind the simplest accidents, and one text message can change an entire life. This is the story of Lily Hart, a woman whose courage and kindness turned a moment of embarrassment into something extraordinary. Lily Hart sat at her small kitchen table late on a Friday evening, the city lights of Chicago flickering through the thin curtains behind her. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence of her one-bedroom apartment, and the faint aroma of coffee hung in the air. It had been a long week. She had worked double shifts at the design agency, helping her boss meet a brutal client deadline. Her eyes ached from staring at the screen for 12 hours straight, but she still couldn't rest. There was something about this night that made her restless. Her phone lay on the table beside her cup. She picked it up and scrolled through her messages. A soft smile appeared on her lips when she saw the name Jason. Jason Reed was the man she had been seeing for almost a month, a charming photographer she had met during a gallery event downtown. He was funny, confident, and warm in a way that drew people to him. But he was also distant, always busy, always traveling for work. Tonight he had canceled their dinner again, blaming a last-minute photo shoot. Lily had laughed it off, pretending it didn't bother her. But deep down she felt that familiar sting, the ache of being someone's afterthought. She took a long sip of coffee, opened her phone, and began typing a message. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled mischievously. Maybe tonight she could remind him of what he was missing. She typed slowly, her fingers trembling slightly. "You keep canceling on me, Mr. Photographer. But maybe this will remind you what you're missing." She added a playful emoji and a picture. Nothing inappropriate. Just a soft, teasing photo of her smiling in her favorite red sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. It was flirty but innocent, a spark of her personality more than anything else. She stared at the screen for a few seconds, her heart beating a little faster, then finally pressed send. The message whooshed away and she laughed quietly to herself. Leaning back in her chair, maybe he would smile when he saw it. Maybe he would finally make some effort. She set the phone down and started tidying the table. But before she could even finish stacking the dishes, her phone buzzed, her heart jumped. She grabbed it quickly, expecting Jason's name on the screen. But what she saw instead made her freeze. "Interesting message, Miss Hart. I'm afraid you may have the wrong number, but I must say, it's certainly the most pleasant mistake I've received today." Lily blinked in confusion. "Wrong number." She scrolled up and checked. Her heart sank when she realized what had happened. She hadn't sent the message to Jason Reed. She had sent it to J. Reed Consulting Finance Advisor, a contact her coworker had given her months ago when she was looking for help with her student loans. Her cheeks turned crimson. "Oh my God," she whispered under her breath, panic flooding through her veins. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. "I am so sorry. That message was not meant for you. Please delete it and ignore it completely." She hit send, her pulse racing. She was mortified. This was beyond embarrassing. It wasn't just a random stranger. It was probably some middle-aged finance consultant who had just received a flirty text and a picture of her. She buried her face in her hands and groaned. A few seconds later, her phone buzzed again. She hesitated before looking. Part of her wanted to toss the phone across the room and pretend none of this ever happened. But curiosity won. No need to apologize. "Miss Hart, accidents happen, though I must admit." Your message brightened an otherwise dull evening. "Most of my clients only send spreadsheets." Lily bit her lip. Half horrified, half amused, the tone was polite but slightly teasing. She quickly replied, "Please don't make fun of me. This is honestly the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to me." On the contrary, the response came almost instantly. "I think it's refreshing in my line of work. People rarely make mistakes this human." Despite herself, Lily smiled. There was something disarming about his message. Calm, confident, with just enough warmth to feel genuine. She typed again, "You're being far too kind. I promise I'm not in the habit of texting strangers. And yet, here we are, strangers no longer." She stared at the message for a long moment, then shook her head. What was she doing? She didn't even know this man. She placed the phone down, deciding to end it there, but then it buzzed again. "Forgive me, I should at least introduce myself. My name is Ethan Reed, and I assure you, I'm not the photographer you intended to reach, though I suspect we might share more than a surname, Ethan Reed." She repeated in her mind, same surname. Maybe that was how she made the mistake. She sighed and typed, "Nice to meet you, Ethan. Though I wish it had been under less embarrassing circumstances. Perhaps, but sometimes the best stories start with the wrong chapter," he wrote back. That line made her pause. It was oddly poetic. Unexpected from a man she assumed worked in finance. She felt a flicker of curiosity she couldn't quite suppress. "Do you always text this charmingly?" she asked, half teasing. "Only when the situation deserves it," he replied. Lily laughed softly, shaking her head. This was ridiculous. She was chatting with a stranger because of a missent text, and yet there was something pleasant about it, something that felt lighter than her usual conversations with Jason. She told herself it was harmless, just friendly banter, nothing more. But hours later, she found herself still talking to him. They talked about everything and nothing. About how Ethan loved coffee but couldn't make a decent cup to save his life. About how Lily once tried to bake bread during lockdown and ended up with something resembling a brick. About how he preferred books to television and how she found peace sketching in her free time. It was easy, effortless, and strangely comforting. It was past midnight when Lily finally realized how late it was. "I should go to sleep," she texted. "I have a big meeting tomorrow, and I've already embarrassed myself enough for one night. Rest well, Miss Hart. And thank you for the most unexpected conversation I've had in years," she smiled, set her phone aside, and went to bed, though she couldn't explain why her heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. The next morning, her alarm rang at 7. She groaned and rolled out of bed. Making her way to the kitchen for coffee, her phone buzzed with a new message. She smiled instinctively before she even checked, then blinked when she saw who it was from. "Good morning, Lily Hart. I hope your meeting goes well. And may your day be less eventful than last night," she chuckled, shaking her head. "You really don't have to keep texting me, you know," she replied, "and miss out on the only person who ever sent me a message starting with Mr. Photographer. Unthinkable." That made her laugh aloud. She couldn't help it. She spent the rest of the morning smiling like an idiot. Even her coworkers noticed later that day, during her lunch break. She searched for his name out of curiosity. Ethan Reed, the name sounded familiar. She typed it into Google, and within seconds her eyes widened. Articles flooded the screen. Ethan Reed, tech innovator and philanthropist. CEO of Reed Technologies. Forbes 30 under 40. The pictures showed a man in an elegant navy suit, sharp-jawed, dark-haired, with piercing blue eyes that seemed both intense and kind. He wasn't just a finance consultant, he was a millionaire, one of the most talked-about entrepreneurs in Chicago. She sat frozen, staring at the screen, her heart pounding. This couldn't be real. She had spent hours talking to him last night, joking, teasing, completely unaware. She felt her stomach twist in panic. Oh no, she must have sounded ridiculous. She almost dropped her phone trying to open the chat again. Before she could say anything, another message appeared. "I have a confession, Miss Hart. After our conversation last night, I was curious and looked up your art portfolio link from your old posts. You're talented, truly. Your sketches have emotion in them. Something rare these days." She froze, her face flushed with both surprise and embarrassment. "You looked me up?" She typed. "Guilty," he wrote. "But only because you intrigued me. Most people I meet want something from me. A deal, a partnership, publicity. But you were real, honest, unfiltered. It was refreshing." Lily exhaled slowly. Part of her wanted to laugh. Part of her wanted to hide under the table. "Well, I wasn't exactly trying to impress a millionaire with my late-night texting mistake. And that's precisely why you did," he replied. The days that followed unfolded in a strange rhythm. They kept texting, short messages during breaks, longer chats in the evenings. At first she thought it was just polite conversation, but slowly she began to look forward to his messages, his humor, his insight, his ability to listen without judgment. It was rare, genuine. A week later, she received an unexpected message in the afternoon. "Lily, may I invite you to dinner? No expectations, just a meal. Two people who accidentally met and decided to talk face to face. I promise to behave." Her heart skipped. She hesitated. The sensible part of her said no, this was madness. She barely knew him, and he was a millionaire. What would they even talk about? But another part of her, the part that remembered his kindness, his words, his warmth, felt something different. Maybe this was fate giving her a strange second chance. She typed back, "Only if it's somewhere casual. I'm not wearing heels and diamonds. Deal," he replied within seconds. Saturday evening, Cafe Solstice, 7 p.m. I'll be the one who owes you a proper apology for the wrong number." That night, Lily stood before her mirror, staring at her reflection. She wore a soft blue dress that hugged her figure just right, her hair loose, her nerves dancing beneath her skin. She told herself it was just dinner, nothing more. When she arrived at the cafe, he was already there, seated by the window, the golden light from the lamps brushing against his sharp features. He rose as she approached, and for a moment, the entire room seemed to fade. He smiled, the kind of smile that reached his eyes, warm and genuine. "Miss Hart," he said, his voice smooth and calm. "You're even lovelier in person." She blushed, laughing nervously. "You say that to all the women who accidentally text you?" "Only the ones brave enough to show up," he replied. And just like that, her nerves began to ease. They talked for hours that evening, about life, about choices, about the price of ambition. He told her about his past, the company he built from his parents' basement, the betrayal of a business partner who nearly ruined him, and the loneliness that came with success. She told him about her dreams, her art, her mother's illness, her struggles to stay hopeful. They listened to each other in a way that few people ever did. By the time they stepped outside, the city had quieted, a soft drizzle falling under the streetlights. Ethan turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "Lily, I have a proposal," he began, and something in his tone made her heartbeat quicken. "You said your mother's medical treatments are expensive, didn't you?" She nodded cautiously. "I can help," he said. "I'd like to sponsor her treatment in full." She froze, the words sinking in slowly. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "I am," he replied. "Think of it as a thank you gift for reminding me what sincerity feels like." Lily stared at him. Overwhelmed, part of her wanted to refuse immediately. But another part, the one that had spent countless nights worrying about hospital bills, felt tears rise in her eyes. "Ethan, I can't accept that. It's too much." "You don't even know me." He smiled gently. "Maybe not yet, but I want to. And sometimes helping someone is the best way to start." The rain glistened around them as they stood in silence, two strangers bound by a mistake that no longer felt accidental. And in that quiet moment, Lily realized that her life had just taken a turn she could never have imagined. She had sent a flirty message to the wrong number, but the man who received it was about to change everything. The shocking offer. The following week passed like a dream that Lily could not fully believe belonged to her. Every morning she woke with the echo of Ethan's words circling in her head, that calm promise spoken under the streetlights, that offer to help her mother. The rational part of her mind told her it was absurd, that no sane person accepted such generosity from a stranger, especially a man whose world seemed to exist among skyscrapers, luxury cars, and boardrooms. But another part of her, the part that had seen sincerity in his eyes and kindness in his voice, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was not a transaction. It was an act of grace. She had grown up believing that miracles happened in small, quiet ways, through people who cared without reason, and perhaps Ethan was one of those people. Still, she needed to understand his intentions before she dared to accept something that could alter her life completely. For 2 days, she avoided replying to his last message. She buried herself in work at the design agency, sketching logos and color palettes, pretending that life remained the same. But it wasn't the same. Every time her phone buzzed, she felt her heart jump. On Wednesday afternoon, while she sat in a client meeting, her phone lit up again. Ethan Reed. The message was short but steady. "Lily, I understand your hesitation. I'll be at Cafe Solstice Friday at 7 p.m. If you'd like to talk, I'll be there. If not, no questions asked." She read it 3 times before tucking the phone away. She admired how he offered without pressure, how he left the choice entirely hers. By Thursday evening, she had already chosen. She needed clarity, and she couldn't get it by running away. Friday came with a gray drizzle that soaked the sidewalks and left the air smelling of wet concrete and rain. Lily spent half an hour debating what to wear, before settling on a simple beige trench coat over her favorite cream blouse and dark jeans. She looked in the mirror, took a steadying breath, and reminded herself that this was just a conversation, not a fairy tale. As she entered Cafe Solstice, the warmth of roasted coffee and low jazz wrapped around her like comfort. Ethan was there, sitting by the same window seat, reading something on his tablet. When he looked up and saw her, he smiled, not the rehearsed kind of smile used for photos, but a genuine one that reached his eyes and softened the sharp lines of his face. "Lily Hart," he greeted, rising slightly. "You came?" I did, she said, untying her coat and taking the seat opposite him. But only because I need to understand what exactly you're offering before I decide anything. That's fair, he replied, folding his tablet and giving her his full attention. And I appreciate you being direct. The waiter arrived with menus, but neither of them looked. When the waiter left, Ethan spoke carefully, his tone thoughtful. I meant what I said the other night. I want to help with your mother's treatment. I'm aware that kind of offer sounds intrusive, so let me explain what it means. I don't give money to strangers without reason, Lily. I invest in people who remind me what being human feels like. You did that for me. She frowned slightly, unsure how to respond. You don't owe me anything, Ethan. I sent you a text by mistake, remember? You don't have to play hero because you feel sorry for me. His lips curved into a small smile. You think this is pity? No, I don't pity you. I admire you. When we talked that first night, you spoke about responsibility. About working 2 jobs, about holding your world together alone. That kind of strength, it's something money can't buy. It humbled me. He paused before adding softly, my mother died of leukemia when I was 23. We didn't have enough time with her. If I can give someone else the time I lost, it feels like honoring her. The quiet sincerity in his voice melted the resistance she had built up. For a long moment she said nothing, only watching the man across from her. The millionaire who had everything and yet looked in that instant as vulnerable as she felt. I don't even know what to say, she whispered finally. Say yes to help, he said gently. Or at least let me show you there are no strings attached. She searched his eyes for hidden motives but found none. Still, pride was a stubborn thing. What if I can't pay you back? Then consider it a gift, he said. But if that makes you uncomfortable, think of it as a grant. You can repay it later in art or in kindness, however you wish. I'm not buying anything from you, Lily. I'm giving you freedom to breathe. Her throat tightened. Freedom, that word echoed in her chest like a prayer. For years she had been trapped by responsibilities, bills, and fear. To be offered relief felt almost dangerous. You said there were no strings, she murmured. So why do I feel like this could change everything? Because it will, he admitted quietly. Not in the way you think. Money doesn't fix hearts, but it can open doors that were locked by fear. Let me open one for you. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the rain against the glass. Lily finally nodded. All right, but I'll only accept if you let me help design something for your company in return. A logo, campaign, anything. I need to earn it somehow. Ethan's smile widened, half amusement, half admiration. Deal, he said simply and extended his hand. When she took it, the warmth of his palm felt grounding, reassuring, real. The following days moved with surreal speed. Ethan's assistant contacted the hospital directly, arranging payment for her mother's treatment. When Lily visited her mother that weekend and told her, the older woman cried silently, gripping her daughter's hands. There are still good people in the world, she said, her voice trembling. Don't question blessings, darling, just be thankful. Lily hugged her tightly, tears soaking her mother's shoulder. Yet gratitude wasn't the only emotion swirling inside her. There was confusion, awe, and an unspoken connection that began to form every time Ethan's name appeared on her phone. They started talking daily, not just about logistics but about life. He told her stories about his early days struggling to build his company from a one-room office, sleeping on the floor beside his computer. She told him about her art school dreams she had abandoned after her father's death. Through each conversation, walls began to crumble. One evening, while they spoke over a late-night call, Ethan asked suddenly, "Do you still paint?" "Not anymore," she replied softly. "I stopped years ago. Life got in the way." "Life doesn't stop art, Lily," he said. "Fear does. If you had the space and time, would you paint again?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Yes." "Then paint," he said. "Don't wait for permission." His words stayed with her. The next day she bought a small canvas and paints with the last of her savings, setting up a corner in her apartment. The moment she picked up the brush, something inside her came alive again, the same girl who once believed that colors could heal wounds. She painted until dawn, her emotions spilling onto the canvas like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. When she sent a picture of the painting to Ethan, he replied, "That's what freedom looks like." Weeks passed and their connection deepened. Ethan invited her to accompany him to a charity gala for one of his foundations. "You don't have to," he said on the phone, "but I'd like to introduce you to people who understand compassion the way you do." Lily almost refused, but her mother encouraged her. Go, her mother said, smiling weakly from her hospital bed. You deserve to see the world beyond your struggles. The night of the gala arrived like something from another universe. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and silver accents, guests dressed in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Lily felt out of place in her simple navy dress, but Ethan's presence beside her made everything easier. When he greeted her at the entrance, he paused, his eyes lingering in admiration. You look extraordinary, he said, and for the first time she believed him. Throughout the evening, Ethan stayed near her, introducing her as a friend whose art reminds me why humanity matters. The guests smiled politely, but Lily noticed how they respected him deeply. He was powerful, yes, but humble in a way that disarmed everyone around him. When they finally stepped outside for fresh air, the city skyline glittered beyond the terrace and Lily exhaled slowly. That was overwhelming, she said with a laugh. You handled it better than most executives I know, Ethan replied, leaning casually against the railing. You have grace, Lily. People see it. She looked at him, the night breeze tangling her hair. You really believe that? I do, he said. And I also believe you belong in rooms like these, not because of who you know, but because of who you are. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. There was a quiet current between them, something unspoken but undeniably real. He looked at her then, not as a man used to admiration, but as someone seeing a light he didn't know he needed. You've changed my routine, he admitted softly. For years I've lived by numbers, meetings, and profit margins. You reminded me that life isn't meant to be calculated. Lily felt her heart race. And you've reminded me that not everyone with money has forgotten their soul, she said with a gentle smile. They both laughed quietly, easing the intensity, but the connection lingered in the air like the scent of rain before a storm. Over the following month, their lives became entwined in small, ordinary ways. He began stopping by her bookstore to bring coffee or discuss new art ideas. Sometimes they worked together in silence, her sketching while he reviewed reports. Other times they simply talked for hours. People at the cafe whispered that they looked like opposites, she the quiet artist, he the polished entrepreneur, but neither of them cared about labels. One evening, after a long day, Lily returned home to find a large flat package leaning against her door. Inside was a framed print of one of her own paintings, professionally scanned and beautifully presented, with a small note attached. This deserves to be seen. E. She stared at it for a long time, tears filling her eyes. No one had ever believed in her this way. That weekend, Ethan called and asked if she could visit his company headquarters to discuss a design project. When she arrived, the office tower loomed tall against the sky, all glass and steel. He met her in the lobby, smiling warmly. Come, he said, leading her to the top-floor lounge where the skyline stretched endlessly beyond the windows. I wanted you to see something. He gestured toward the wall. Hanging there was her painting, the very first one she had created after their conversation. Beneath it, a small plaque read, Hope in Color by Lily Hart. She gasped, covering her mouth. Ethan, what did you— I bought it, he said, for the price of your mother's final treatment cycle. I told you I'd make it an investment, not a favor. Emotion overwhelmed her. Tears slid down her cheeks as she whispered, You didn't have to do this. I wanted to, he said softly. Because this painting reminds me that mistakes can lead to miracles. She turned toward him, words failing her. The gratitude in her heart felt too vast to express. Ethan, why me? She asked finally. He smiled, his voice barely above a whisper. Because the moment your wrong message reached me, my life stopped running on autopilot. You reminded me of the world outside the numbers. You reminded me what connection feels like. Lily stepped closer, the air between them charged with something both tender and terrifying. You changed my life, she said. And you changed mine, he replied. The evening light poured through the tall windows, bathing them in gold. Neither of them spoke again, but in that silence something beautiful settled between them. An understanding that destiny sometimes hides behind the smallest accidents. That a wrong message can lead two broken souls to exactly where they're meant to be. Bound by kindness. The days that followed that golden evening at Ethan's office became a turning point in Lily's life. For the first time in years, she woke each morning with a quiet sense of purpose that went beyond survival. She was no longer simply running from bills or responsibilities. no longer defined by exhaustion and anxiety. There was light in her eyes again, a rhythm in her heartbeat that came from creation, from hope, and yes, from something deeper that she dared not yet name. Her mother's health had improved steadily with the new treatment, and each hospital visit felt less like walking through despair and more like stepping into possibility. Whenever she saw her mother smile again, fragile but genuine, she silently thanked Ethan in her heart. Yet beneath that gratitude lived an undercurrent of confusion, because every time she thought of him, her pulse quickened in ways that frightened her. She told herself it was admiration, maybe friendship, but she knew it was something she couldn't categorize so easily. One crisp morning, about a month after her painting had been displayed in Ethan's company lobby, Lily was at the bookstore arranging a new window display when she noticed a familiar figure outside the glass. Ethan stood there dressed in his usual simple elegance, a dark wool coat, hands in his pockets, eyes bright with a warmth that made her chest tighten. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron and stepped outside, startled, but secretly delighted. "You're here early," she said, smiling. He returned the smile with that quiet steadiness that always disarmed her. "I was nearby for a meeting, but I couldn't resist stopping by. I needed a coffee and I thought this place might serve better company than any cafe." Lily laughed softly. "Flattery this early? You must really need caffeine." "Always," he said, following her inside. They sat in the corner of the shop near the window, where the morning sun streamed through the glass, casting warm patterns on the wooden shelves. She made him a cappuccino, extra foam, just how he liked it. For a while, they didn't talk about anything serious, just books, the changing weather, her plans for a new art series she had been sketching at night. But as the minutes passed, the conversation grew deeper, the way it always did when they forgot the world existed around them. "You know," Ethan said, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly, "when I hung your painting in the office, I didn't expect it to change the atmosphere there. But it did. My employees stop and stare at it almost every day. One of them told me it feels like hope is watching over them." Lily felt her throat tighten with emotion. "That's the most beautiful thing anyone could say about my work," she whispered. He nodded. "It's not just a painting, Lily, it's a reminder. It reminds me that behind every deal, every decision, there are people. People with fears, dreams, stories. You helped me remember that." She looked at him then, seeing not the powerful entrepreneur that the newspapers wrote about, but a man who had carried too much responsibility for too long, who had built walls around himself to survive in a world that demanded perfection. In that moment, she realized something quietly profound. He had rescued her from hopelessness. But in some way, she had rescued him too. Over the next few weeks, their connection deepened in ways neither had planned. They met often, sometimes for lunch near her work, sometimes for walks along the river after his meetings. He would tell her about the pressures of corporate life, the endless expectations, the loneliness that came with power. She would tell him about her dreams, her struggles, her small victories. Their worlds were so different, yet their hearts spoke the same language of endurance, of kindness, of yearning for something real in a world that too often felt artificial. One evening, they were walking through Millennium Park. The air was cool, and the city lights shimmered across the water. Lily stopped for a moment, gazing at the skyline. "You know, before all this," she said softly, "I used to think the world was divided into two kinds of people, the ones who got lucky and the ones who worked themselves to exhaustion just to survive. But then I met you and it changed my view. You've shown me that sometimes even the ones who seem to have everything still fight battles no one sees." Ethan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "And you showed me that strength doesn't come from winning. It comes from trying again even when everything feels lost. You remind me of my mother in that way. She used to say the universe favors those who act with good hearts." Lily smiled faintly. "Your mother was a wise woman." "She was," he said quietly. "And she would have liked you." Something in his tone made her heart ache, a blend of longing and unspoken affection that lingered between them. She didn't know what to say, so she simply looked at him, and for a long moment neither spoke. The silence was soft, filled with understanding. That night, as Lily sat in her apartment painting, her mind kept drifting back to him. She realized how much space he now occupied in her life, not just through his kindness, but through the way he made her believe in herself again. She picked up her brush and began painting a new piece, this time not inspired by sorrow or duty, but by warmth and gratitude. She painted two figures standing beneath a city skyline, facing the horizon together, the light of dawn breaking over them. She titled it Bound by Kindness. When she finished, she took a picture and sent it to Ethan with a short message. "For everything you've done." He replied almost immediately, "It's breathtaking, but you forgot to sign it." She smiled at the screen. "I thought maybe it wasn't just mine." The next morning, he surprised her with an invitation. "There's an art event at the Orion Hotel tomorrow evening," he said over the phone. "It's for emerging artists. I reserved a small booth in your name. Would you consider showcasing your work?" Lily nearly dropped the phone. "Ethan, I can't, I'm not ready for that. Those events are for real artists." "You are a real artist," he said firmly. "You just haven't been seen yet." She hesitated, overwhelmed. "I don't have enough pieces." "Then show what you have," he said simply. "Show your heart. That's what people will remember." When the night arrived, Lily stood in the hotel ballroom surrounded by canvases, her palms sweaty, her heart hammering. She had displayed 6 of her best works, each one representing a different chapter of her journey. The crowd was elegant, composed of critics, collectors, and art lovers. She had never felt more out of place, but when Ethan arrived, everything inside her steadied. He wore a classic black suit, his presence commanding yet calming. He greeted her with that reassuring smile that always made her forget her fear. "You're radiant," he said softly. "Now go show them why." The hours that followed unfolded like magic. People stopped at her booth, drawn by the emotion in her art. A gallery owner approached her, asking for her contact. A journalist requested an interview. When one elderly woman wiped tears from her eyes and whispered, "Your work feels like healing," Lily felt her throat close with gratitude. Ethan watched from a distance, pride flickering in his eyes. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned and the music softened, Lily found Ethan standing by the balcony overlooking the city. She joined him quietly, the lights reflecting in her eyes. "I can't believe this happened," she whispered. "I sold 3 paintings tonight, 3. I didn't think anyone would care." He turned toward her, smiling. "People care when art is honest, and yours is the most honest I've ever seen." She looked up at him, emotion flooding her chest. "I don't know how to thank you, Ethan, for all of this, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." He shook his head. "Don't thank me. You did the work. I just gave you the chance." Their eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. The hum of the city faded, the noise of the ballroom disappeared, and all that remained was the space between them, filled with a quiet electricity neither could deny. He took a slow breath, as if choosing his next words carefully. "Lily," he said finally, "I didn't plan for this. I didn't expect a wrong message to turn my world upside down, but every day since I've felt different, lighter, alive in a way I haven't been in years." Her heart pounded as she whispered, "Ethan," but he didn't let her finish. "I know we come from different worlds," he continued, his voice low and sincere, "and I would never want to make you uncomfortable. But if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, then I need you to know, this isn't just gratitude anymore. You've become something more to me." Lily's breath caught. She stared at him, her emotions spinning. Shock, tenderness, fear, longing. She had tried to ignore it for weeks, the way her heart reacted when he was near, the way his kindness disarmed her completely. Now there was no hiding it. "Ethan," she said softly, "you've done so much for me. I don't even know how to respond to that." He smiled faintly. "You don't have to. Just be honest." She looked away, the city lights blurring through her tears. "I care about you," she admitted quietly. "Maybe more than I should, but I'm scared. Our worlds don't make sense together." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "Then let's stop worrying about sense and start trusting what's real." The moment hung between them, fragile and beautiful, like the pause before the first note of a song. The rain began to fall lightly outside, a soft mist against the glass. He brushed a stray hair from her face, his eyes searching hers. "Whatever this is, Lily," he said, "it's not a mistake." And for the first time since the night she sent that wrong message, Lily allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was exactly where she was meant to be. The following morning, she woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing. It was a message from Ethan. "Breakfast at the pier. No meetings, no chaos. Just you, me, and bad coffee." She smiled at the screen and typed back, "Deal." That day they sat by the waterfront wrapped in coats, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of rose and gold. He bought pastries from a nearby stall, and they talked about nothing and everything, about childhood memories, future dreams, and how strange life could be. At one point, Ethan looked out at the water and said quietly, "I used to think success meant never needing anyone. Now I think real success is finding the one person who makes you forget the difference between need and want." Lily felt her eyes sting with tears she couldn't hide. She turned toward him and said softly, "And I used to think love only belonged to people who didn't struggle. But now I know sometimes it grows strongest where pain once lived." He reached over, covering her hand with his. "Then maybe that's what we are," he said. "Proof that even mistakes can turn into miracles." The sun rose higher, the light wrapping around them like a promise. For the first time in years, Lily felt no fear about the future. She had learned that kindness could heal, that love could grow from the unlikeliest places, and that sometimes, when life feels like it's falling apart, it's actually falling into place. The choice between hearts and worlds for several blissful weeks after that sunrise by the pier, Lily felt as though she were living inside a dream stitched together by quiet moments of laughter, shared secrets, and the strange serenity that came from finally belonging somewhere she never expected to fit. Life took on a rhythm both exhilarating and calm. Mornings filled with her mother's improving health and afternoons spent sketching commissions that now poured in after her art showcase. Evenings that ended with Ethan's voice on the other end of the phone, steady and warm as they talked until sleep blurred their words into gentle silence. She had once believed that love was an extravagance reserved for people who had time to chase it. But with Ethan she learned that sometimes love appears not as fireworks but as a quiet hand, reaching through the noise of life saying, "I see you," even when you don't see yourself. Yet beneath that growing bond lingered an invisible line neither of them dared to cross completely. Ethan never once overstepped. His gestures remained respectful, his tone careful, his presence protective rather than possessive. But Lily could sense the weight of the emotions he carried beneath the calm surface, and she felt it too. The pull of something that could rewrite the shape of their lives if they allowed it. She tried not to dwell on the practicalities, but they lingered like shadows at the edge of light. He belonged to a world of board meetings, jet travel, and public attention. She belonged to modest cafes, late-night art, and quiet corners where anonymity felt safe. What could possibly bridge those two universes without one of them losing a part of themselves? The answer began to unfold one Thursday afternoon, when Ethan invited her to his company's Innovation Summit, an event attended by investors, media, and senior executives from around the world. "You don't have to come," he had said over the phone, "but it would mean something to me if you did. It's important, and honestly, I'd rather see at least one genuine smile in that sea of formal ones." His voice carried the faint vulnerability of a man unaccustomed to asking for emotional support, and that alone made her agree. On the day of the summit, she arrived at the downtown convention center wearing a simple yet elegant white dress that floated softly as she walked. Her nerves prickled as she stepped through the vast lobby where enormous banners displayed the words, "Reed Tech Global Forum, Innovating the Future." Cameras flashed, journalists gathered in clusters, and assistants hurried between glass doors carrying folders and headsets. It was a different universe from the world she knew, dazzling and intimidating. But when she saw Ethan across the room speaking with a group of executives, her anxiety melted into quiet pride. He looked every inch the leader they wrote about, confident yet grounded, commanding yet kind. When he spotted her, his eyes lit with that unmistakable warmth that belonged only to her. During his keynote speech, Lily sat near the front, watching him command the stage with a voice that was both powerful and sincere. He spoke not about profit margins but about responsibility, about how technology should serve people, not replace them. "Innovation," he said, "is meaningless if it forgets compassion. The future belongs to those who remember that every algorithm still relies on a human heartbeat." The audience erupted into applause, and Lily felt tears prick her eyes. That was the Ethan she knew, the man who still believed that kindness could coexist with ambition. Afterward, as the reception buzzed with conversation, Ethan introduced her to several board members and partners. Some greeted her warmly. Others regarded her with polite curiosity, their eyes flicking between her modest dress and Ethan's tailored suit. One woman, impeccably dressed and clearly influential, smiled thinly and said, Ah, so you're the artist Mr. Reed has been so inspired by. He's spoken of you quite a lot lately. Her tone was cordial but edged with subtle judgment. Lily responded with grace, thanking her and speaking confidently about her art. But beneath the surface she felt a quiet sting. She knew how the world of wealth and power worked. Appearances mattered, and she did not fit their mold. Later that evening, after the event had ended, Ethan found her standing alone on the balcony overlooking the city lights. "You were incredible today," she said softly. "I think half the room fell in love with your speech." He chuckled. "Half the room was checking their stocks while pretending to listen. But I only cared about one person hearing me." She looked up, smiling. "You're impossible. And you're honest," he said, stepping closer. "You always tell me the truth even when no one else does. That's why I need you around me." Before she could reply, a familiar voice interrupted. "Ethan!" Turning, Lily saw a tall man in an expensive gray suit approaching with easy confidence. "There you are. We were just talking about your next venture. The investors are ready to move once we finalize the London partnership." He paused, glancing briefly at Lily with polite curiosity. "And you must be?" Ethan smiled calmly. "Lily Hart, a friend." The man nodded, though his expression betrayed mild surprise. "A friend, of course. Well, good to meet you." Then turning back to Ethan, he added meaningfully, "Victoria called earlier. She'll be back in Chicago next week. She's eager to reconnect about the foundation project. I told her I'd pass it along." Lily's stomach tightened. The name meant nothing to her, but the way Ethan's expression shifted, subtle, almost imperceptible, told her it meant everything. After the man left, she asked quietly, "Victoria?" He hesitated before answering. "My ex-fiancée, the one I told you about, the woman who betrayed me years ago." "Oh," Lily murmured, unsure what else to say. "She's involved in one of the charity boards my company sponsors." He continued, "We haven't spoken in years, but she still handles part of the foundation's outreach." Lily nodded, forcing a smile, though something inside her felt unsettled. The rest of the evening passed in polite conversation, but when she returned home, she couldn't shake the image of that elegant world where people like Victoria moved effortlessly, while she still felt like a visitor. A few days later, her fears materialized sooner than expected. Ethan called, his tone apologetic. "Lily, I wanted to tell you before you heard it elsewhere. Victoria requested a meeting to discuss the Foundation's new art therapy program. It overlaps with some of your work, and I'd like you to be part of the proposal." Lily hesitated. "You want me to meet her?" "I do," he said gently, "because your perspective matters, and because I don't want to hide anything from you." When the day arrived, the meeting took place at a sleek conference room overlooking the river. Victoria Langford was exactly as Lily had imagined, tall, poised, with the effortless grace of someone accustomed to luxury. She greeted Lily with a polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. "I've heard a great deal about your art," she said smoothly. "Ethan seems rather taken with it." "Thank you," Lily replied calmly. "I'm passionate about using art for emotional healing. That's what I hope this program can focus on." Victoria listened with a nod, but her gaze flicked occasionally toward Ethan, as though she were studying his reactions. After an hour of discussion, the meeting concluded amicably. Yet Lily left with an ache she couldn't name. She knew Ethan's past with Victoria was over, but seeing them together, their shared history, their polished ease, made her feel small in ways she hadn't felt in months. That night, she sat by her window painting in silence, trying to still her racing thoughts. She loved Ethan's kindness, his honesty, the way he saw the world, but she couldn't ignore the reality that surrounded him. His life was filled with people like Victoria, elegant, educated, powerful. She was an artist from a small apartment who had stumbled into his life through a wrong number. How long before that difference became too much? As if sensing her turmoil, her phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "Can I come over?" Minutes later he arrived, breath visible in the chilly air, worry etched across his face. "Lily, what's wrong?" She tried to smile. "Nothing. Just a long day." He didn't believe her. "It's about Victoria, isn't it?" She looked away. "I saw how people look at us, Ethan. I saw it at the summit and again today. I don't belong in your world." He stepped closer, his voice firm but gentle. "Then I'll leave that world behind if I have to. Do you understand?" "None of that matters to me." "It should," she said softly. "You built it with your own hands. It's your life, your legacy. I can't ask you to give that up. He took her hands, his eyes searching hers. You never asked. You just gave me something that world never could, peace. Tears welled in her eyes. And what if peace isn't enough when the world starts judging you for loving me? Then let them judge, he whispered. I've been judged for less meaningful things. I'd rather be misunderstood for the right reasons than admired for the wrong ones. She wanted to believe him, and part of her did. But deep down, she feared the storm that might follow. 2 weeks later, that storm arrived. An article appeared in a business magazine with a headline that made her stomach drop. Mystery artist captures the heart of tech mogul Ethan Reed. The accompanying photo showed them together at the art gala, her laughter frozen mid-smile. The article speculated about their relationship, suggesting that Ethan's new muse might be influencing his decisions. Within hours, the story spread online, and by evening her phone was filled with messages, some kind, some cruel, many intrusive. Her small bookstore's social media page flooded with comments, some mocking, some accusing her of chasing wealth. When Ethan saw the article, he was furious. I'll have my PR team take it down, he said, pacing his office. They had no right. Ethan, Lily interrupted softly. Please don't, it'll only make it worse. People will think you're trying to protect me because it's true. He stopped, meeting her eyes. It is true. I will protect you. But the damage was done. For the next several days, Lily avoided public places, buried herself in her art, and tried not to read the headlines. Her mother called, worried. Darling, people will always talk. You can't let noise decide your worth. Yet, despite her mother's reassurance, Lily couldn't escape the feeling that her presence was now a liability to Ethan. One evening, after a long day of painting, she found herself standing outside Ethan's office building. She hadn't planned to come, but something inside her needed clarity. When she stepped into his office, he was alone, staring out at the city through floor-to-ceiling glass. The skyline glowed around him like a crown of lights, but his expression was weary. You shouldn't have to deal with this, she said quietly. He turned, surprise flashing in his eyes. Neither should you. She took a deep breath. Maybe it's time we face the truth. Your world doesn't forgive easily. The article will fade, but there will be others. Rumors, opinions, expectations. You'll be questioned for every decision, every move. I don't want to be the reason you lose the respect you've earned. He crossed the room in 3 strides and stopped before her. Lily, do you think I built all this just to be imprisoned by it? I've spent years chasing approval that means nothing. For the first time, I have something real. I'm not letting go of that because people gossip. Tears burned her eyes. And what about me? I fought so hard to stand on my own, to prove that my art, my work, my life means something beyond your generosity. I can't let people think I exist because of you. He exhaled, the pain in his gaze matching hers. Then what do you want me to do? She swallowed hard, voice trembling. I want you to keep being who you are, and I want to find my place without leaning on you. Maybe that means stepping back for a while. The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, he said softly, if space is what you need, I'll give it. But understand this, Lily, nothing changes what you are to me. She nodded, unable to speak. He walked her to the elevator, neither of them saying goodbye because the word felt too final. The following weeks blurred into a quiet ache. Lily threw herself into her work, creating piece after piece that carried the weight of everything she couldn't say aloud. Her art grew deeper, more powerful, filled with longing and resilience. Critics began to notice. Galleries reached out. One evening, she received an invitation to host her first solo exhibition, an opportunity she had dreamed of for years. She wanted to share the news with Ethan immediately, but stopped herself. They hadn't spoken in almost a month. She wondered if he'd moved on, if his world had swallowed him again. The night of her exhibition arrived in late spring. The gallery buzzed with guests, the walls alive with color and emotion. Every painting told a piece of her story, from the night of the mistaken message to the quiet strength of rediscovery. As she walked among the crowd accepting congratulations, she felt a bittersweet pride. This success was hers, built from pain and courage alike. Then through the throng of people she saw him. Ethan stood near the entrance, dressed simply, his eyes filled with pride and something softer. Relief. When their gazes met, time folded in on itself. He approached slowly, as though afraid to shatter the fragile moment. Your work is extraordinary, he said quietly. Every piece feels alive. "I didn't know you'd come," she whispered. "I wouldn't have missed it," he replied. "You told me once you wanted to earn your place. Tonight you did. Completely." She looked up at him, tears glistening. "It's strange," she said. "When I painted these, I thought I was losing you. But maybe I was finding myself so I could meet you again properly." He smiled, eyes shining. "Then maybe we both needed the distance to see clearly." They stood in silence as the applause for her closing speech rippled through the room, a sound that felt like closure and beginning all at once. Outside, the night breeze carried the scent of rain again, the same scent that had followed every turning point in their story. As they stepped out into the street, Ethan turned to her. "Lily, we don't have to choose between hearts and worlds. We just have to build a bridge strong enough to hold both." She met his gaze, understanding blooming like sunrise. "Then let's build it. Slowly, honestly, together." He took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the quiet certainty of two people who had already survived every test that mattered. And as they walked down the lamplit street, surrounded by the hum of the city that had once felt too big for either of them, Lily realized that true love isn't about belonging to one world or another. It's about creating a new one where both hearts can finally rest. The life we built from a mistake months turned into seasons, and time moved gently around Lily and Ethan like a tide that no longer crashed but breathed. The world that had once seemed divided between his wealth and her simplicity had softened into something shared and balanced, not through grand promises, but through quiet constancy. After the night of her first solo exhibition, when he stood among the crowd and called her work extraordinary, everything between them changed in ways neither could define, but both could feel. They no longer spoke about differences or distances. They spoke about plans. They spoke about projects that could bring art and compassion together, about foundations that could use color and creativity to heal broken spirits in hospitals and shelters. They spoke like partners in purpose before they were partners in love, and in that shared dream their bond deepened beyond the need for definition. Lily's art career grew steadily. The success of her exhibition opened doors she never knew existed. Newspapers wrote about her journey from a bookstore manager to an artist whose work embodied hope. Interviews followed, but she handled every one of them with grace, never once exploiting Ethan's name or influence. When asked what inspired her, she always said the same thing. That kindness was her muse, that humanity was her canvas. Behind those words, Ethan would smile quietly, because he knew she was talking about the way he had believed in her when no one else did. Yet he never took credit. He remained in the background, content to let her light shine. Their love evolved not through dramatic declarations, but through small, enduring gestures. On mornings when she painted, he would appear at her studio door with coffee and simply sit nearby, reading or making notes for his company while she worked in silence. At night, they would walk through the city hand in hand, not caring who saw them anymore. The scandal that had once filled tabloids had long since vanished under newer stories, and those who had judged them before now saw something genuine and lasting. There were still whispers sometimes, envy disguised as curiosity, but neither paid them any attention. They had learned that peace was not found in the absence of judgment, but in the decision to rise above it. One winter evening, as snow drifted outside the tall windows of her new art space, Lily stood before a blank canvas, feeling the familiar tremor of anticipation. Ethan was behind her, setting down 2 mugs of cocoa. "You're staring at that canvas like it just asked you an impossible question," he teased softly. She laughed, shaking her head. "It feels like every new beginning does that. I never know what the next painting will become. Sometimes I wish life worked like art. You start with chaos and somehow end up with meaning." Ethan leaned against the table, his eyes thoughtful. "Maybe that's exactly how life works," he said. "We both started in chaos and ended up here." She smiled, dipping her brush into the paint. "Then this one will be called serendipity." That night she painted until dawn, and when she stepped back to look at the finished work, her eyes filled with tears. On the canvas were 2 silhouettes standing beneath an open sky, their hands intertwined, surrounded by countless strokes of color merging into harmony. The light of dawn glowed behind them like a promise. Ethan walked closer, silent for a long moment, and then whispered, "That's us, isn't it?" She nodded. "Yes, the life we built from a mistake." As spring approached, they turned their shared vision into something tangible. Together they established the Heart Reed Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting art therapy programs for children recovering from illness and trauma. The name had been her idea, the work behind it theirs equally. The first center opened inside the same hospital where her mother had once been treated. On Inauguration Day, Lily stood beside her mother, watching children splash colors onto paper with joy. Her mother's eyes glistened as she said, "You turned your pain into healing for others, sweetheart. That's what real strength looks like." Ethan, standing nearby, placed a gentle arm around Lily's shoulders, pride radiating quietly from him. The months that followed were a blur of creation and purpose. Lily's foundation blossomed across cities, while Ethan restructured parts of his company to focus on humanitarian technology, software that could improve hospital logistics and educational access. They worked side by side but never lost their simplicity. They still spent lazy Sundays cooking together, laughing over burnt pancakes or escaping to the countryside when they needed to breathe away from the city's noise. They built a rhythm that was not grand or glamorous but real, a rhythm of two souls that had learned how to move in tune without losing themselves. But life, as it always does, tested them again, not with betrayal or scandal this time, but with choice. Ethan's company received an offer for global expansion that required him to relocate to London for 2 years. It was an opportunity that could multiply his impact, but also pull him far from the foundation they had built together. The night he told Lily, they sat in their apartment surrounded by the hum of city lights. He looked torn, his usual composure clouded by uncertainty. "I don't want to leave what we've built," he said, "but this project could change millions of lives. I don't know how to choose." Lily listened quietly, her hand resting on his. "Ethan, you taught me that love shouldn't cage someone's purpose. You have a gift for changing systems, for helping people on a scale I can't even imagine. You should go. I'll keep things here running. We're strong enough to handle distance." He looked at her, eyes soft but filled with conflict. "And what about us?" She smiled through the ache in her chest. "We're not defined by distance. We're defined by what we build when we're apart." He went to London a month later. The goodbye at the airport was quiet and tearful but filled with certainty. They didn't promise daily calls or constant messages. They promised trust. For 2 years they lived in different time zones but never out of sync. She sent him photos of new paintings. He sent her videos of schools adopting their therapy programs. They met whenever schedules aligned, sometimes in Paris, sometimes in New York, always finding their way back to each other like the tide to the shore. The distance, instead of weakening them, carved depth into their bond. When his project concluded and he returned to Chicago, the reunion was simple yet profound. It wasn't cinematic fireworks, but something far more beautiful. The sound of her footsteps running across the gallery floor as he entered, the way he lifted her into an embrace that felt like home after a long journey. "You kept your promise," she whispered against his shoulder. "You built something beautiful." He smiled, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes. "So did you." A year later, on the anniversary of her first exhibition, Ethan organized a surprise event. He told her it was a private donors' dinner for the foundation, but when she arrived, she found herself standing in the same gallery where everything had begun. The walls were lined not with her art alone, but with photographs of every project they had built. The children's hospitals, the community centers, the people whose lives had changed because of their work. At the center of the room stood a new painting she hadn't created. It was his. Crude, unpolished, yet full of emotion. It showed two hands reaching for each other through a swirl of light and color. Beneath it, in delicate script, were the words, "Every miracle begins with a mistake." Lily turned, tears streaming down her face, and found Ethan kneeling with a small box in his hand. "The first time I saw your message on my phone, I thought it was an accident," he said, his voice trembling. "Now I know it was destiny disguised as one. I don't need perfection, Lily Hart. I just need the life we already built, messy, real, and ours. Will you marry me?" She covered her mouth, overwhelmed, her heart a storm of joy and disbelief. "Yes," she whispered through tears. 1,000 times yes. Their wedding was not the lavish spectacle the media expected. It was small and intimate, held in the same art center where they first launched their foundation. Her mother walked her down the aisle, and the guests were mostly children from their programs, laughing and tossing petals instead of confetti. Ethan wore a simple gray suit, and Lily wore a dress she designed herself, soft and flowing, like the brushstrokes of her favorite painting. When they exchanged vows, they didn't promise forever in dramatic phrases. They promised understanding, kindness, forgiveness, and the courage to keep growing side by side. Years passed, and their story became one told quietly rather than loudly. A story people referenced when they wanted proof that fate could write in mysterious ways. The foundation expanded internationally, their names associated not with scandal or wealth, but with compassion and art. Lily continued to paint, and her work matured into something timeless. Each canvas carried fragments of their journey: the mistaken text, the first dinner, the nights of doubt, the mornings of renewal. Ethan continued to lead his company with integrity, always reminding his teams that innovation meant nothing without humanity. On the 10th anniversary of the night they first met, they stood again by the same pier where they had watched the sunrise years earlier. The air smelled of salt and spring, and the city glowed behind them. Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders and said quietly, "Do you ever think about that night?" "The message?" Lily laughed softly. "I think about it every day. One wrong message and everything changed." He smiled, kissing her forehead. "I used to believe success was about control. Now I know it's about surrender. To life, to love, to the unexpected." She leaned against him, her eyes drifting to the horizon. "And I used to believe mistakes ruined things. Now I know they sometimes rebuild them better." As the sun dipped below the skyline, turning the river gold, they stood in silence, bound not by circumstance or status, but by the quiet certainty of souls that had found home in each other. The journey that had begun with embarrassment and uncertainty had become a testament to everything real in the world: resilience, compassion, and the power of choosing love even when it seems impossible. Their story reminded everyone who heard it that life doesn't always follow logic. Sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come wrapped in awkward moments and wrong numbers. Sometimes the universe stumbles on purpose so that two people can learn what it means to truly see one another. And sometimes the smallest accident becomes the greatest blessing: a single message that finds its way not to the intended recipient, but to the one heart destined to answer it.